Carly Levin, and welcome back to Legal Tech Briefs. Today, as our guest, we have Anna Alvarado-Pearce, who's Chief Legal Officer at Texas Capital Bank. I'm very excited to have Anna on today as a former banker myself and hearing about how do you manage a role like Chief Legal Officer at a huge bank like Texas Capital and to hear what's going on in innovation within the bank. So Anna, great to see you. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Carly, for the invite. Super honored, and what a privilege to talk to you today. So thank you for the time.
Great. So if you don't mind, would you start with a personal background? How did you get to this current role?
Wow. So I'm gonna try and
Easy
get.
question. Easy starting off question.
I think I probably do have to start with my upbringing because it does have to do a lot with kind of who I am and what I'm doing now. But I'm the daughter of Mexican migrant workers, and I grew up, was born in Central California, picking grapes. So literally, my first job was picking grapes, helping my family. So that's the kind of stock that I come from, and I knew like early on when I was doing it, it's like God, life has to be better than this. There's no way I'm like destined to do it, right? But again, that's the environment that I was in. And at some point, Cesar Chavez with his crew came in. It was during one of the boycotts. And I remember this gentleman just speaking to just the people there. I must have been like, I don't know, maybe 8, 9. And just everybody was sort of glued to that person. And it was just, very smart. And it was just teaching people about certain things. I'm like, well, I think that's what I want to be. I learned later that he was a lawyer. So early on, I just had that. I'm like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a lawyer. And then when I got a little bit more wind of what that would be, I'm like, I want to be in the courtroom. I want to be that kind of lawyer. Like I want to be the lawyer that people, are listening to. I want to be an influential person. So that's how that started. And through that, I was very fortunate to have really great teachers who recommended me to an Upward Bound program. So what that is a math and science program in high school. And so I ended up doing a summer in UCLA, which was probably super transformative for me because that's where I learned about the different types of universities and colleges. Because of our economic situation, I got a lot of application fee waivers. So I just started like applying afterwards. So that really got me my start. And I was interning at the time at TRW in El Segundo, and we were staying at campus in UCLA. So really opened my eyes to like even more possibilities. At that point, my parents decided to move to Texas. I was a senior, so I literally graduated my senior year in Fort Worth, Texas, which if you ask me what I'm still bitter about, that's what it is. It's a hard transition. So that's kind of my upbringing. So picking grapes, then we get to Texas, and then, there's obviously economic hardship. We were using a pawn shop. And the manager said, hey, do you want to come work for the pawn shop? I'm like, oh my gosh, can I? I'd love to. So that was my real first paycheck job, was actually working at a pawn shop in Fort Worth. Fast forward several years later, the company that I was working then bought that pawn shop in a huge transaction, cash America. But we'll get to that. So that's my upbringing. So I love movies. If I reference a lot of movie quotes or scenes, it's because I am a movie buff. So when I think about those days, it's like Scarlett O'Hara standing in the fields of like Gone with the Wind. I looked at those rows of grapes and declared like, oh my gosh, as God is my witness, I'll never pick grapes again. But that's how I felt. I'm like, life cannot be just this. So that's my background. So anyway, so I'll stop with there. If there's any questions you have.
What an amazing story. What an amazing story. So you decided to go to law school. How did you give me the quick run to getting to Texas Capital?
Yeah. Okay. So quick run. I graduated from high school and I wanted to go far, far away from Texas because it's a huge culture shock. So I got a nice opportunity to go to Bentley University in New England. Never been there before. Ever hadn't even visited the school, but I knew I wanted something small and that was focused around business and accounting. Because while we were growing up, I would also manage the family's finances, and we would sell cassette tapes and swap meets. So like, a lot of what I would say unsophisticated entrepreneur, just I knew enough that I needed to learn more about it. So I go to Bentley University, I get an undergrad degree in international economics. I get a scholarship, I get an MBA, concentration in finance. Then I go to Southern California, work in accounting and finance for a couple of years. And I always was going to go to law school. So I told my mom, I'm going to apply to SMU. the only school, and I think I want to come back to Texas. If I get in, I'm moving back to Texas. So that was in 2004. So I did undergrad at SMU and worked full time. And I also had my first kid around that same year. So I was probably averaging about 4 hours of sleep for about 3 years. All right. So again, just going back to, I will do what it's going to take to kind of get to the next level. So during that, during law school, when I was working for a trial and boutique litigation firm where I met my first in-house employer, First Cash. I happened to be the only associate who was bilingual and bicultural, and this was a huge breach of fiduciary case that involved one of its officers that was, doing things that he wasn't supposed to in Mexico. Since I was the only one, I got to do all of the really needy work. So that's how I established my relationship with the then CEO of First Cash. Okay. So fast forward maybe 5 years, and I continue to hone my skills as a trial lawyer. Did complex commercial litigation, did, several arbitration trials, did, for a couple of years, exclusively labor and employment representing executives. So that is my upbringing as a trial lawyer. I run into the First Cash CEO, and he's like, hey, I think we really want to build out our strategy in Mexico. I think we really need a legal department. Will you consider? So I said, let's do this. Never look back. I was there for 11 years and was very fortunate to help them build the compliance and legal infrastructure and the whole growth strategy to really kind of dominate the entire country of Mexico, Central America, and then Colombia. So I got the privilege of doing that for 11 years. So that's where I grew and learned to be a corporate athlete, if you will. So COVID hits, and going through some personal issues, going through a divorce. So the recruiter calls and says, Anna, I think I have an opportunity for you. And I said, well, you know what? Sure, I'll take a look at it. And it was this position. And then I looked at it and I'm like, I turned it down. I said, David, I'm like, this isn't even a lateral move for me. Like, I'm doing international work. Like, this is like some, what? Regional community bank in Dallas? Like, I haven't been to Dallas in like 10 years. And mind you, that's only like 40 miles apart. So I turned it down. He calls back and he says, Anna, he's like, you should talk to the CEO. First-time CEO. He's a really special guy. Just talk to him, do me a favor. And I said, okay, fine. But I can only do it like at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever day. Well, joke's on me, because Rob wakes up at like 4 in the morning, as did like the CHRO that was here. So I talked to the CHRO. She's like, you have to just talk to Rob. So I talked to Rob, and frankly, Rob's vision, when I was talking to him, I was like, wait, you want to do what again? And I was, put on my trial lawyer and just kind of peeling back and asking these questions. And he's just a fantastic visionary. And so when he shared his vision with me, it scratched that itch again. And it's like, okay, I can help you build that. Okay, this is going to be phenomenal. And he's like, don't worry, come and talk to a couple of people here. So I did. I didn't know what a sales job was until like after I'm in the banking industry. So I meet with a few people. I'm like, these are my people. So as I'm driving, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is either going to be, we're either going to crash and burn. It's going to be a fantastic story. I'll still learn a lot, right? Or it's going to be hugely successful. I'll learn a lot. It'll still be a fabulous story. So fortunately, it's been the latter. And that's almost 5 years ago. So really, Rob's vision is what brought me here.
That is the right attitude that you had, though. That either way, it was going to be a great outcome. I
Right.
really like the beginning of the story where you wanted to get from as far from Texas as possible, and the end of the story where you are chief legal officer at a bank called Texas Capital.
Yeah. And it's full circle. But, in between there is when First Cash hired me during that explosive growth period as well for that company is when we acquired Cash America, which is our largest competitor that was also an international pawn shop company. And the Cash America was the store that I first got to work with when I was in high school. So it really was like a full circle moment. I always say God has a sense of humor.
Mhm.
Without a doubt. So that's in my experience. Anyway, so it's been a really rich and fulfilling experience again at Texas Capital. I never thought that I would have another opportunity to build something with just a highly intelligent, super motivated, ambitious group of people into a pretty historic accomplishment when you think about the financial services industry in the context of Texas in current times.
It's interesting because so many people in banking really grow up in banking and stay in banking and maybe move between banks. And you certainly had a very deep finance background, but are new-ish to banking. How has your mindset brought change to the bank?
Yeah.
How have you thought about things differently in a way that people were not expecting it?
Yes. So it is spot on. You're right. And that's one of the things that was surprising is like people that were here had grown up in banking. So I was, for all intents and purposes, like a complete outsider to the industry. I mean, I had the consumer finance entirely different. So when you think about the legal framework and the compliance framework, I would say in the consumer realm, specifically within the pawn industry, is a mile wide, an inch deep. Quickly got into banking. I knew nothing, Carly. Like I was, I mean,
A
I'm
mile
not
and
kidding.
it's 10 miles deep in banking.
10 miles deep and an inch wide with so many nuances. And
Yeah.
so I remember very distinctly, probably maybe not even to a year, and we're talking about sort of evaluations and I said, Rob, I know you did not hire me for my banking jobs. I said, you were lucky. I was so naive because the complexity that exists in the traditional bank is enormous. So the thinking that I brought was again, very different. I came from an industry that really didn't even care about reputation. There was a stigma already associated with it, and a lot of people don't understand it. It's like, of course, if you don't grow up poor, you don't understand why somebody would need a loan that's $100. And but oh no, by the way, the most transparent transaction you can possibly have. Okay, to one where it's like, wait, reputation? Okay, let me get my head around that. And at one point, I was very vocal, and I just said something. I'm like, look, we can't be condescending to a group of people and really like, yes, I did say that, right? So I like there was a little extra where you just don't see in banking. So I am known to kind of maybe push things a little or challenge people even a little bit more and even their thinking because I didn't grow up in it. So it's like, what do you mean I have to give all of the board materials to the regulators? No. Oh, wait, we do. Right. So it is challenged me in so many ways, but in a good way. Just really learning to engage differently with peers, with regulators. So, I say that if I became a corporate athlete at First Cash, here I've become a high performing corporate athlete because everybody runs really hot, everybody's ambitious, everybody's motivated, everybody is on the same mission. I've never been around a group of people that are so type A, so intelligent than like my first year in law school, right? So it was like, wow, okay. Oh, wait, before, I could actually say, hey, this is what we're doing, let's run with it. And now it's like, I have to speak to several groups and several stakeholders to get to what I need to do. So that's also challenged me. But again, I welcomed it all.
What does you have a lot of responsibility. You've got board governance, regulatory oversight, and corporate growth. What does innovation look like to you? What does innovation mean to you?
Um, Good. Okay. I think a lot of things, if I were to peel it back and look at it from a legal lens, it's not necessarily anything flashy, but it's identifying where can we make things less frictionless, right? It's always not some flashy product that says here we are. It's like in my legal function, it's like my hat is, and also as corporate secretary, is protect the company, protect the board, and enable the business, and they're not mutually exclusive. And so, it can come a lot of different ways. Obviously, automating a lot of stuff is can be innovative, but it's really those things that I believe that translate back to what our mandate is, and that's to be client obsessed. What makes it a better, smoother, faster, better process, right? So, um, and when you think about like the regulatory framework that we're in, usually people, well, there's a little bit maybe it's not congruent, right? How can you have innovation in this super regulated industry? To which I say the actual regulatory part is what gives us clarity, certainty, which is fantastic. And then it's just kind of up to us how we kind of bounce around there so that our clients have a better experience than any other financial institution.
It's a lot of responsibility, though. It's a lot of responsibility you have, and and I imagine you're spending a lot of time now talking about AI, adopting AI, and scrutiny around that. How do you, it's different than a startup where they can just try things, break things,
That's
and there's
right.
no regulatory oversight. How do you safely implement AI within a bank? How do you safely experiment? What's the mandate that you give to the team on that?
I always tell to remember we enable. So we protect and then we enable, and they are not mutually exclusive. So working within those bounds. But you're absolutely right. And in fact, it's funny you say that. I always tell people, I'm like, look, guys, we're not Silicon Valley. We don't run fast and break things. We cannot. If we run fast and break things, we affect people's money, people's accounts, people's experience. So we don't have the luxury of doing that. That said, our CEO is high charging that our mandate is let's make sure we are a fast follower in the AI race. I think it will change everything, how we do things. I don't think any role or any area is immune to it. We've embraced it. We have, and I'm actually interim chief human resources officer and have been for the last 7 months or so. I forget.
You
Um,
you needed more responsibility there.
I mean, I grew up picking grapes before dawn, so I was up for the challenge. But so we're employing kind of a bottoms up approach, educating our employees on the one hand, but then making sure that our mandate also is being followed. Again, the wrong way of doing it is you just unleash it and there's no governance around it. So it is a very fine dance between piloting, right? And then full on implementation. And that's where I think we have to be comfortable with it. I always tell people, like, I'm not risk averse. I am very comfortable with risk. And unless and until we have specific regulatory rules, because we are regulated, and we have well documented governance procedures or processes as we're doing this and also testing, I'm perfectly fine sitting across the table from a regulator or anything and defending our position. Because the reality is that technology is advancing a hell of a lot faster than the regulatory framework. And we're not going to be a fast mover. We're not going to be the pioneers. I'd rather be a little late than like the first one to a consent order. So we really are working intentionally in these groups to try and get to where we need. So it's like almost everything happening all at once with guardrails. And
Hmm.
it's the village.
Have you found a good approach to training? When I was in banking, I always found that was the hardest thing to do was bankers are so busy. They're so busy. They have so much to do. They want to be in front of their clients. So they're on the road. To get them to learn something new or try something new, you really have to over communicate. There's no such thing as over communicating to them. Have you found something that works to teach new technology skills?
I think it's in how we have positioned it and presented it, to be honest with you, because you're absolutely right. Like, if I'm frontline or I'm a banker, I'm like, please don't box me down and make me learn, like, do something, to where we're flipping the script. And it's like, listen, we have been dealing with change management since the moment all of us decided to start working at Texas Capital. We are change agents. This is a part of change management. It is not something you have to do. It is something that I promise you is going to make you more efficient. So we are literally kind of mandating, if you will, everybody go in there and try this and be comfortable with it. I was at a town hall and I said, just remember, just double G's, all right? GG, have a growth mindset, and then just have grace. We're not going to get it right. You're not going to, so don't go in there with zero expectations other than, oh my goodness, I can actually probably use this to make me more efficient. Maybe I'm going to have it draft my emails to certain clients and schedule it or whatever it is. So I say aim small, miss small. One of my favorite quotes from The Patriot, Mel Gibson. I love that movie. But I use that a lot, right? It's nothing more than change management, and it's nothing more than an additional tool to help you be better. If you're not embracing it, you will be left behind. And not because it's going to replace you, because I think that's the wrong narrative. I think the narrative is it is a tool that will make you more efficient and free you up to maybe even be a little bit more creative with what it is that you have to do. But we're like super excited about that. But it does take a lot.
It's interesting. Someone else had the exact same quote about lawyers this week to me. So aligned with what you're saying about bankers.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Then they're a very risk averse bunch. Okay. So yeah, it's just a lot of hand holding, a lot of hand
Yes,
holding, and you just
yes.
can't escape that.
Switching gears a little bit, innovation, technology, we talked about a little bit. International expansion, you had a role where you were leading a ton of international expansion at First
Yep.
Cash. What breaks from a legal perspective when you're growing across borders? We have a lot of companies in our portfolio that are moving across borders and doing it quickly. What are the top lessons you learned in doing that role?
Oh, I have so many, but I think if I had to summarize it in like a theme or one word, it would be assumptions. They're the first thing that breaks. It's the assumptions, and specifically, it's like the governance assumptions, right? Like, so for example, U.S. we're an at-will state. I mean, country for the most part, right? There's pockets of things that people have to be aware of in certain states, like California and all that other good stuff. But for the most part, it's like at will country. In countries like Latin America, for example, they are not, right? It's very contract oriented. You think you're making a headcount decision up here, but it's going to trigger a bunch of statutory severance obligations and then maybe other possible violations. So assumptions generally are the very, very first thing that break. So, and then again, within the contract structure, then I think the other thing that usually breaks is governance. The mistake I see and have seen, and it's been consistent across, is companies tend to import or export, I guess, their structure or their org chart before really thinking through about what that legal or compliance framework should be, right? So I think they do it backwards, and it's natural. It's like, okay, well, you're the head of whatever, go and import that same org structure, but that's not the most efficient way to do it, because what's happened is you do that and then something breaks, and it's a lot more expensive to try and undo that, and so it's a difference between a foot fault and then a major fault. So like I always try and caution, let's just get the legal infrastructure framework first before we start exporting our org structure. I think that's kind of, those are the things that first break. um yeah, assumptions.
Now I'm curious, what about the flip side? What have you seen gone tremendously well?
Yeah. When you embrace the ambiguity of it all, and people are really forgiving if you just show up and show your face. So that works really well, because people will pretty much forgive everything if you put the time and face time, and show that you really care. I don't care what it is. People are really forgiving. So that always really works out well. So, right. So just kind of embracing the ambiguity, embracing what you think is going to be like, holy shit, we really messed this up. And let's just be quiet about it, or let's just not really talk about it or whatever, versus, no, you know what, let's own up to it. And then you just be very transparent about certain things if you can. So that really works well. Being flexible works well. Also, what works well is, again, if you have enough lead time or foresight, meeting with stakeholders. I would say like your government stakeholders first, and getting to know them. That works. That works well.
Yeah.
And I guess in a word is really just honoring the fact and recognizing the fact that you're going into a different jurisdiction, and that you're doing everything on the front end to show the different stakeholders there that, hey, you're in it for the long haul. You took the time, even though if you don't know if this thing's going to work or not.
You really make me feel like being human. Developing relationships is what matters, is showing up and having someone you can call and someone who you know about their families and their what they do outside of work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's without a doubt. Always works.
So you are required to be a lot of things today, a technologist, a risk manager, an operator, a building the culture. How have you seen the role of the chief legal officer change in your time in this role and your prior role?
So it's funny because I don't know like any other way to be than like operator. That, and it's maybe just because I just had that background. It was, and I think I'm sure like me being naive about so many things also contributed to that. And like the more I grew up in the legal field, the more I'm like, oh, okay, people are not like me in my thinking. It's like they're traditionalists in the sense that, great at protecting and being a really good issue spotter or turning this scene and just flagging every possible thing, to which is great, but that to me that's like table stakes. And I think as I talk to other people, the role has been um, less of that, more into like you're an operator, you're actually a business leader that has a law degree, and you kind of act accordingly. So I think that's the expectation. Like I can't imagine somebody like that, being in front of somebody like Rob, right? It's like, okay, and then what are we going to do about it, right? So it is coming up and being a problem solver early, but then also being an executioner as well. So it really has, it's an operating role. A chief legal officer is an operating role. We got to be multilingual in all the things that you just mentioned, and literate in all of those things, because they're. I think that's the name of the game now.
I like that framework. Some of our portfolio companies or legal tech startups in this space, they're operating in highly regulated spaces, but they're very early in their journey.
Yeah.
If you were that early, what would you do differently? How would you start a legal department in a highly regulated company or industry? What do you wish you could have done at that early stage?
Oh gosh, I wish I think three things probably. First and foremost, I wish the first thing I would have done was to sit down with my chief risk officer and have him or her introduce me to the regulators. Number one, I think that's one of the first things I would have done. And I think the second thing, and by the way, I literally did have to build a department from scratch. There was a lot of things that happened where it's just me and the intern for a couple of months. I really had nobody's. But I would hire. I wouldn't hire for pedigree. I'd hire for like just curiosity, and just can you kind of get this done? And then I would probably make a huge pitch to invest in technology first for the legal department. So I would reverse it. Like I think initially I hired number one, I didn't bother with the regulators. So I'm like, I thought they were annoying. So I'm like, what? But I wish I learned the hard way. And then, I think I thought about people first before looking at it, from like the organization standpoint is, hiring for structure, and again, not just people. And then I would have invested in technology a lot earlier. So I think I think if somebody's coming into that, is I would look at what's the structure of your legal team, what should it be, have those meetings. One of the first things, do a road show and FaceTime with your regulators, know who they are, establish a relationship first. And then see if you can get away with some wins for your legal team and investing in technology first.
Well, I think that's been a key theme throughout our conversation and a good lesson for today's AI driven world that relationships still matter
Very
and
much.
building relationships both internally, externally with regulators are all important.
Yes. Yeah.
If you had any, my last question, if you had any predictions for when we have this conversation again in a year or 5 years, how do you think your role or will look different? How do you think the chief legal officer role is changing?
Um, Gosh, I don't. That's a great question. I think it will. I think the expectations will continue to evolve, and that the role of an operator, you have to be super conversant in the technology, and with the expectation of you're going to be responsible for some AI agents, not only within like the legal department, but across. So being conversant and understanding how that interplay is going to happen, because when everything, if everything goes well, great. But when things happen that aren't supposed to, it's wrong. Legal still continues to kind of be the first line of defense in that regard, right? So I think the evolution has to be that we have to become more versant conversant in like AI technology and how that's going to affect not just your department but the firm as a whole. Hands down, I think that's what it is.
Well, we're standing by at the Legal Tech Fund if we can help you with any of that over the next few years. Feels like a natural segue. Had to take it.
Good,
Uh,
good.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really enjoyed this. Your story is amazing. Your story is
Uh,
amazing, and your role is really, really neat. Uh,
Thank you. I'm
so
having a
thank you.
lot of
Thank
fun.
you.
I'm having a lot of fun. Sometimes people ask me, so, what do you do at First Cash? I mean, at Texas Capital, excuse me. I said, I mean, like, I get the pleasure of changing, of cleaning the tiger's cage while the tiger is still in it. And that tiger is so very many different tigers. So a balancing act for sure, on different fronts all the time.
And I am sure whenever you solve one thing, the next thing is moments behind it.
Yeah, I am an expert whack-a-mole player.
hmm hmm Well, thank you again. Good to see you.
Thank you, Carly. Thanks again for the opportunity. It was great and fun talking to you.